Welcome to the third lecture of the COVID-19 awareness lecture series. So we are happy to have today with us Dr. B. Usha, who is currently the Vice Principal and Professor and HOD of the Department of Microbiology at Annapurna Medical College and Hospitals, Salem. Coming to her experience, she has got 5 years of professional experience as a consultant microbiologist involved in diagnostic bacteriology, mycobacteriology, mycology and serology. Also has got 14 years of teaching experience in medical microbiology to medical college students. With regard to her education, she did her MD microbiology from the Madras Medical College during the year 1999 and her bachelor's of that is MBBS from Coimbatore Medical College in 1991. And she is also a member of the National Academy of Medical Sciences. And she also has MSc Biotechnology from Maharaj University. And she is also having a certificate course on hospital infection control, which is abbreviated as CCHIC. With regard to her work experience, she has been working as an assistant professor from junior medical officer, assistant professor at Vinaya Missions Medical College from June 92 till about 2000, and from 2000 to around 2006 she was assistant professor at the Department of Microbiology, Government Mohan Kumar Mangala Medical College, Salem. Then from 2006 to 10 as assistant professor at the Vinaya Missions Medical College, the Department of Microbiology, and from 10 to August 2010 to March 2013 as professor at the same institute. And now she has been working as the Vice Principal and HOD of Microbiology at Annapurna Medical College since April 2013. She has published a lot of papers in national and international journals, attended several seminars, both national and international, and she is also a member of the life member of the Indian Medical Association, life member of the Indian Association of Medical Microbiologists, and life member of the Society of Prevention of HAI. So with this brief note, we are very happy to welcome on behalf of the IDP of Canvas, Dr. B. Usha, to enlighten the participants present here on the vaccine and treatment protocols for COVID-19. Welcome, madam.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for the very good introduction, and hope my speech enlightens you on this topic. But I think most of you know most of the facts. It will be only an reinforcement of what you already know. So hoping for the best. Sir, shall I start this thing? Share my screen?
Yes, madam. Yes, madam.
Okay. So good afternoon to one and all present on this webinar on Zoom. Coming to the introduction, which you all know about, this coronavirus disease is an infectious disease caused by a newly discovered virus discovered from Wuhan city from China. The disease spreads by droplet transmission, and people who get infected with COVID-19 experience mild to moderate respiratory illness to a more severe breathlessness and hypoxia. Public health and social measures are implemented across the globe to suppress the SARS-CoV-2 transmission and reduce the mortality as well as the morbidity. One such measure is vaccination, which is now said to be the life-saving prevention in this pandemic. So let us see few facts about vaccines and also about the treatment for COVID-19. So first, coming to the structure of the coronavirus, which you already know. This is an enveloped virus, which is an RNA virus, and this envelope on its surface, it contains protrusions called as spike proteins. And this envelope virus, it envelops a nucleocapsid and an RNA. So the most important structure of this virus is the envelope protein as well as the spike protein. The spike protein is the most important aspect of this infection because it is this spike protein which attaches to the acetylcholine receptors present on the respiratory epithelium and causes infection. Then what is the importance of this envelope protein? This envelope protein is the protein which is basically detected using reverse transcriptase PCR, which is the gold standard for diagnosis of COVID infection. So this is responsible for the genus isolation, and the second gene which we isolate is the gene responsible for the spike protein. So this is the structure of the COVID virus which we are more of concern in this pandemic. So coming to a few facts about vaccine, what are the methods of vaccine preparation? There is a short video which will enlighten you of what are the methods by which vaccine can be prepared. So all COVID-19 vaccines, they aim to produce immunity against SARS-CoV-2 virus by stimulating an immune response to the antigen. And usually it is the spike protein found on the surface of the virus which we commonly tangle. The whole virus vaccine is one method where the active virus is disabled or inactivated, and when they enter the system, they stimulate an immune response generated against the antigen on the virus but without causing disease. When the immune system comes into contact with the infected cells, antibodies, T cells, all are produced and they keep a memory of these antigens. This memory is kept in such a way that once again, or when the virus enters for the second time, these virus, the active virus, when it enters for the second time, the same virus will be tackled by the antibodies and it prevents infection. This is how the whole virus takes place. In case, we can use even the protein subunits. For example, we can take up only the protein spike or the spike protein alone, or the fragment of the spike protein can be taken and introduced into the system, and it is very easy and cheap to prepare. And these are incapable of causing disease, and these fragments, they will not be capable of infecting cells, but they are less likely to be recognized by the immune cells. So these, when they are introduced, immune response takes place, but it will be a little weaker. So to enhance the immune response, these viruses or spike protein are mixed with adjuvants. Adjuvants are factors which enhance the immunity. So when these are attached with the adjuvants, they create an immune response, and this immune response also keeps a memory of the particular antigen and tackles the infection when they come across for the second time. The same way, this spike protein can be introduced into a viral vector. The genes responsible for the spike protein alone can be taken and introduced into the cells so that they stimulate or they produce the spike proteins in that particular cell. And these spike proteins once again stimulates immune response and they tackle the infection. And they produce large amount of the protein in response to the infection. The same way, there are another method called as the viral vector vaccines, where we use a virus or a vector, which is namely a adenovirus, which is very commonly used, and this genome is introduced into the adenovirus, which acts as a carrier particle and introduces the gene which is responsible for production of the spike protein into the human cells. Once they enter into the human cells, they start producing the spike protein on its surface, which stimulates an immune response. The same way, nucleic acid vaccines are also available, where messenger RNA or the DNA of the particular virus which is required to produce an immune response can be delivered into the genome of the infected cell. This can be done either by directly inoculating into the cell by pushing it or by forcing it using a gene gun. This, once it enters, it is actually very cheap to develop and very quick to develop, but only thing is it is a newer technology. So with hundreds of COVID-19 vaccines now in development, a mixture of approaches will be needed, and it is very much required to stop the global spread of this coronavirus infection. So let us hope for the best for numerous vaccines of various categories to come into a limelight so that we can curtail this infection. So coming to the theoretical part, there are types of COVID vaccines. There are mainly three approaches: the whole microbe approach, the subunit approach, and the genetic material approach. The whole microbe approach can be in turn, either you can use the whole inactivated vaccine or the live attenuated vaccine or the viral vector vaccine. What is this inactivated virus vaccine? This inactivated vaccine, you use the killed SARS-CoV-2 virus And this killed virus is recognized by the immune system to trigger a response without causing any illness. This builds an immune response which keeps in memory, and so the body can fight against SARS-CoV-2 in the future. But the only thing is, this produces, it requires an adjuvant or booster dose for it to effectively produce antibodies. And one such vaccine which is under this category is your Bharat Biotech, or which is the Covaxin, which is available readily now for use in the public. Coming to the live attenuated vaccine. What is a live attenuated vaccine? Live attenuated vaccine is, you have the live virus which is attenuated. Attenuated means the disease causing capacity is brought down, or its pathogenicity is brought down. So they will produce an immune response, but it will not produce disease. But there are chances for an ineffective attenuation which may also produce a disease in this particular vaccine. So with this vaccine, it contains the weakened SARS-CoV-2 virus which produces immune response and antibodies. And one advantage of this live attenuated vaccine is the immune response resembles natural infection. One classical example is our oral polio vaccine which we are using now. Then coming to the viral vector vaccine, as I said, virus vector is used for introduction of the genome into the infected human cell, infectious human cell. And this is commonly which we use as a vector is the adenovirus. There are various serovars of adenovirus used for this vector-based methodology of vaccine production. And this vaccine, once it enters into the human system, it produces antibodies which protects the human cells. And they generate a very strong immune response. And one classical example is the AstraZeneca or the Covishield, which we are using now. So this is about the three different types of whole virus vaccine. Now coming to the subunit approach. A subunit means a specific part of the virus or a subunit of the virus. The subunit may be a protein or any structure. In case of COVID-19, the spike protein, which is responsible for attachment of the virus to the respiratory epithelial cell, is taken into account. Why the antibodies produced against this particular subunit spike protein is preferred is, once the spike protein is destroyed in the virus, it will not attach to the respiratory epithelial cells, thereby no infection will occur. So that is why they prefer the spike protein to be taken in the subunit approach. Then the genetic material approach, where a section of the genetic material, which could be either the DNA or an RNA, and in case of COVID-19, it is the RNA which we take up. A nucleic acid vaccine delivers a specific set of instruction to our cells, either as DNA or the messenger RNA, and they make specific proteins for which an immune response is needed and respond to it. Now coming to what are all the vaccines which are available in India. The two vaccines which every one of us know was granted emergency use authorization by the Central Drug Standard Control Organization in India, namely the Covishield, which is manufactured by Serum Institute of India, and Covaxin, which is manufactured by Bharat Biotech Limited. And we are much awaiting the release of Sputnik V, which is mainly prepared from the Reddy's laboratory, which has also been granted emergency use authorization in the month of April, and we are expecting it to start up. And few centers in Hyderabad and Karnataka have also started vaccinating people with Sputnik V. So coming to the comparison of all the three different vaccines which are available in use for Indian population are the Covishield, Covaxin and Sputnik. The manufacturer of Covishield is Serum Institute, Covaxin is Bharat Biotech, and Sputnik is Reddy's laboratory. And the type of vaccine is Covishield and Sputnik. Both are viral vector vaccines. But only difference is, in Covishield, they are using adenovirus of serovar 149 for using it as a vector to transfer the genes into the infected cell. Whereas in Sputnik, For both the doses, they use the same adenovirus as a carrier particle. But in case of Sputnik, they are using two different adenoviruses, adenovirus 159 for the first dose and adenovirus 015 for the second dose. Why it has been used so is in order to prevent the neutralizing antibodies produced against adenovirus 159 in the first dose. So that is why they say the efficacy for Sputnik is more than 91% as per the study which is available right now. And all the three vaccines, we need 2 doses, but the interval varies between all the 3 vaccines. Interval for Covishield is 12 to 16 weeks, Covaxin is 4 to 6 weeks, and Sputnik is about 3 to 5 weeks. And storage, all has to be stored at 2 to 8 degrees centigrade. And efficacy, Covishield has 90% efficiency, and Covaxin is just under the phase 3 trial, and up to phase 2 trial they say it has about 81% of efficiency, whereas Sputnik has 91% of efficiency. And the cost, it is 780, 1140 and 1145 respectively for all the 3 vaccines, but it is free for all the people who vaccinate themselves in the, this is all for the private hospitals, but it is free for all the people getting vaccinated under a government setup. So we will see the facts about vaccines regarding COVID by a few questionnaires. Who can get vaccinated against COVID-19? All because of various myths which has been spreading around the corner. Many of the people did not get vaccinated at the earlier stages because of the frightfulness or queries in their mind regarding the safetiness of the vaccine. But now, with the disease spreading so fast and the deaths rising in the second wave, many people have started come forward to get themselves vaccinated. So who can get vaccinated? Everyone 18 years of age and older is recommended to get the COVID-19 vaccination. Then you may ask, what about people less than 18 years? People less than 18 years, a study has been already started in AIIMS Delhi, and they are planning to give a report by the end of this month, because the third wave is expected to affect mainly the pediatric age group. So the government is planning to roll out with the vaccine, which will be eligible to be given to the people who are less than 18 years, so that the third wave can be brought down. Why should I get vaccinated? This was the main question around most of our mind in the early stages. Why should I get vaccinated? The benefits of COVID-19 vaccine outweighs the risk. All may think that if we get vaccinated, you may get some complication and even death may occur. But if you overweigh the benefits of COVID-19 vaccine, the risks come down. So it is better to get vaccinated rather than not get vaccinated. And another important point is, once you are fully getting vaccinated, you start not only protecting yourself, but also you have started protecting your loved ones. And should I get vaccinated if I get COVID? This is a very common question many of us got, because most of the family members in each household, at least one of them have got infected in the second wave of COVID-19. So should I get vaccinated if I get COVID? Yes, you have to get vaccinated if you are already had an infection. But when? That is the question which has to be answered. So if you have got COVID positive and you have not taken any vaccination or not even a single dose of vaccination, you have to get vaccinated after 3 months of recovery. Say if you are positive after the first dose of your vaccine, the second dose can be taken after 2 months of your recovery. So this is the guideline given by the WHO, which is also supported by our Ministry of Health and Family Welfare of India. So can I get COVID vaccine if I am pregnant? This I will say yes, but the choice is given to you, because you are the one who are going to get vaccinated, and pregnancy itself has a higher risk of severe illness from COVID-19. So it is better to get vaccinated if a person is pregnant. And recent reports have shown that people who have received COVID-19 vaccine during their pregnancy, they have passed protective antibodies to their babies through the placenta, which could help protect them after birth. So it even prevents neonatal infection of COVID. So, but still there are limited data, but with the available data, it is far assuring that all pregnant females should also get vaccinated. Can I get vaccine if I am breastfeeding? Yes, this is also of your choice, but based on how the vaccine works in the body, it has nothing to do with breastfeeding activity, and they are thought not to be a risk to breastfeeding women or to their babies. And recent reports have shown that breastfeeding women who have received COVID-19 vaccine have antibodies secreted in their breast milk, which could help protect their babies from COVID. So my suggestion will be, even a breastfeeding mother can get vaccinated. Can I get vaccinated if I am currently sick with COVID? No. As per CDC, if you are currently sick with COVID, you should not get yourself vaccinated until you recover following the guidelines. If you are recovered, if you have not taken vaccine, you have to take the vaccine after 3 months, first dose after 2nd month. Say in case a patient who has underwent any operation or admitted in an ICU, he can take the vaccine after 1 to 2 months, and second dose of Covishield you have a break of about 84 to 120 days, and lactating mothers can take vaccine. If you have fever, please avoid taking vaccine and wait for 15 days after recovery, following which you can take a vaccine. And blood donation, 15 days after taking the vaccine or RT-PCR test negative is required for giving a blood donation. And second dose of the vaccine is about 4 to 6 weeks of vaccination. After getting vaccinated, will I test positive for COVID-19 or an antibody test? We could have come across many WhatsApp messages and Facebook messages and social media that a person who already have vaccinated have got infected. This is very common because the immunity starts only after a certain period of vaccination. And you will never be COVID positive because of the vaccination. Because COVID-19 vaccine will not cause you to test positive on RT-PCR. However, if your body is developing an immune response to the COVID-19 due to the vaccination, which is the goal of getting vaccinated, you may test positive on the COVID antibody test. So this antibody test, it gives you a sense of well-being, or it gives you a proof that the vaccine has activated your immune system, and it keeps memory of the antigen to tackle it in the future. Can I spread COVID after I get vaccinated? Say I am getting vaccinated today. So will I spread the infection? No. You will not get, once you get vaccinated, you will not be in a position to spread COVID-19 to others. How long will protection of COVID vaccine last? This is $1 billion question running around in most of our mind, as well as the scientists, as well as the researchers' mind also. So since this COVID virus infection and vaccine are new, and experts are still learning how long protection lasts for those who get naturally infected with COVID and those who get vaccinated against COVID, we are yet to get any stipulated time which will give protection against COVID-19 vaccine. But you will not be fully protected until 2 weeks after the second dose of COVID-19 vaccine. So you will be protected fully only after 15 days or 2 weeks of your second dose of COVID-19 vaccine. So after vaccination, when will I get protected? So when you can see the benefits of vaccinated: less risk of illness, milder symptoms, reduced length of contagion. Whereas if you are not vaccinated, you have higher risk of illness, worse symptoms, and highly contagious. And 14 days after any vaccine, you are deemed to develop an immune response. And 14 days after the second dose, it enhances your protection and your immune system is fully protected against this COVID-19 infection. But in spite of getting your second dose, in spite of crossing 2 weeks after your second dose, wear a mask and follow social distancing. The protect yourself from your getting infected. And do vaccine protect against variants? This is also a very common question going around in social media. We have now so many variants and we are yet to identify so many variants in the future too. And now WHO has termed these variants as alpha, beta, gamma and delta. And this delta virus is the one which is mainly the reason for the second wave of COVID-19 in India. So this B117, which is the UK variant, and this B1351 is the South African. This is called as the alpha virus now. This is the beta virus, and P1 is the Brazilian virus. So these are the three virus variants, and the recent virus, which is the Delta virus, is the B16172, which is the Delta variant, which is the reason for the second wave of COVID-19 in India. So no such studies have given a proof that this vaccine prevents against the variants. But if you see the AstraZeneca or Covishield, it is very much efficient in preventing the UK variant and the Brazilian variant, but not the South African variant. And this UK variant is mostly controlled by most of the vaccines available in the world. So as far as our Indian strain is concerned, there are no data which suggest that the vaccine gives so much of protection. What is the percentage of protection against this Indian variant or the Delta virus? We have to wait for the studies to be published. So with that we finished the few facts about COVID vaccine. And coming to the symptoms, before going into the treatment, you need to know what are the symptoms of COVID-19, which everyone knows. So these symptoms, they can be classified into most common symptoms, less common symptoms and serious symptoms. The most common symptoms are fever, fatigue and dry cough. Less common symptoms are sore throat, diarrhea, headache, loss of taste and smell. And serious symptoms are difficulty in breathing. And they say loss of taste and smell is equal to doing an RT-PCR, which is the gold standard which diagnoses COVID-19 infection. Then coming to when this infection starts and how long the person is infectious. The incubation period is from about 5 to 7 days, and they become highly infectious, and the patient is becoming infectious even 2 days before the symptoms are shown out. So if you say day 1 is the start of symptom, even 2 days prior to the start of symptom, they start spreading the infection. So they are highly infectious for the next 5 days, and they are less infectious up to 10 days. And if they recover within 10 days, they become non-infectious. But if they become severe and they are having a chance of hospitalization or admitting in an ICU, they become still more infectious and they spread the infection. That is why we quarantine ourselves up to 10 days or maximum, as per our Ministry of Health and Family Welfare of India, to be on the safer side. They say quarantine of 14 days is necessary to prevent spread of infection. And the onset of symptoms, this fever, fatigue and myalgia starts within 1 to 4 days, and dyspnea around 6 days. And most of the patients, as per the study, they say admission takes place at around the 8th day, and ARDS around the 8.2 days, and admission around 10 days. So these days from between 8 to 14 days are the most critical point of the disease, where cytokine storm occurs. This is the time where most of the people, they get delayed in getting admitted and they succumb to the infection. And coming to the classification of the disease, expert committee has been formed by our Tamil Nadu government for managing the COVID-19 infection, and guidelines have been given. And based on the committee's suggestion, it has been classified into category 1, category 2 and category 3. Coming to category 1, which is in turn classified into COVID positive and a COVID suspect. A COVID positive patient will be RT-PCR positive irrespective of symptoms, whether he has symptoms or no symptoms, and his SpO2 is greater than 94% and his respiratory rate is less than 24 per minute. The same way, if a person is RT-PCR negative and he has any symptoms suggestive of COVID with SpO2 greater than 94 and respiratory rate of less than 24 per minute, he is called a COVID suspect. The same way in category 2, the same thing, but only thing is the SpO2 will be 90 to 94 and SpO2 in COVID suspect will be 90 to 94 and the respiratory rate in both categories of COVID positive and COVID suspect will be 24 to 30 per minute. Whereas in category 3, the SP2 will be less than 90, whereas respiratory rate will be greater than 30 per minute, which is indicated by involvement of the lungs. So there is a reduction in SpO2 or oxygenation and also respiratory rate because of dyspnea. This is regarding the clinical category based upon which asymptomatic, mild, moderate, severe and critical cases have been defined. Asymptomatic cases, they have no symptoms. They have an SpO2 of 94% in room air and respiratory rate of less than 24 per minute. No evidence of hypoxia or breathlessness. And mild cases, patients will be having just an uncomplicated upper urinary tract or upper respiratory tract infection with the same parameters. Whereas moderate clinical category will have pneumonia but with no signs of severe disease, where they have an SpO2 of about 90 to 94% in room air and the respiratory rate will be around 24 to 30 per minute, which says that involvement of the lung has started. And severe cases, severe pneumonia will be detected as you see in the CT chest and SpO2 will be less than 90 and respiratory rate will be greater than 30 per minute. And critical conditions where they present with acute respiratory distress syndrome with septic shock, where they have hypotension and respiratory failure. So these are the 5 different categories of clinical disease in COVID-19. So before going into the treatment aspect, we need to know what are the investigations we have to do at the time of admission, after every 72 hours and at the time of discharge. So at the time of admission, in case of mild cases, you have to do a complete blood count, random blood sugar, ECG, D-dimer and renal function test if you are going to start an antiviral, namely remdesivir. Because remdesivir is a nephrotoxic drug, so you have to look into the renal function test, look for its normal range and then start them on remdesivir. In case of moderate, the CBC, random blood sugar, HbA1c if he is going to be a diabetic, renal function test, lung function test, C-reactive protein, D-dimer, serum ferritin, LDH, procalcitonin which is an indicator of sepsis and CT thorax. The severe, all along with TROP-T and echo has to be done because in severe cases, myocardium involvement is very much detected. And daily you have to repeat the CBC, renal function test, acid blood gas analysis because if the patient has acidosis, you have to treat the acidosis or else you will lose the patient, and lung function test. And every 72 hours, we have to do D-dimer if it is initially high and CRP, D-dimer and serum ferritin and serum LDH. These are the 4 main markers which has to be monitored regularly for changeover of treatment. So what is the importance of this complete blood count? In complete blood count, we mainly look for the neutrophil lymphocyte ratio or NLR ratio. This NLR ratio is commonly or normally between 1 to 3. If it crosses beyond 3, then we have to think it could be COVID-19 infection. Based upon the age, whether it is less than 50 or greater than 50, if you have an NLR ratio of less than 3, you can be at home isolation. If you have an NLR greater than 3 and you are less than 50, you can go to a general ward with no oxygen requirement. But if you are at an age of greater than 50 and you have an NLR ratio of less than 3, in spite of that, you have to be in the respiratory monitoring and supportive care because we don't know when your SpO2 will fall. And NLR of greater than 3, you transfer to ICU and invasive respiratory support equipment is very much essential. And CRP, the CRP is a C-reactive protein which is an acute phase protein produced by the hepatocytes or the liver cells due to injury or inflammation. So this CRP raise is very well useful in monitoring the severity of the disease. Once CRP is raised, the normal CRP value should be less than 6 milligrams per liter. If it rises, then you have to think of starting a steroid treatment, which brings down the inflammation. Then coming to D-dimer. This D-dimer is one of the fibrin degradation products, and it shows the presence of clot in the body. So these pulmonary embolic clots is the reason or pathophysiology behind pneumonia in case of COVID. So a higher level of D-dimer in the body can be a dangerous sign when affected with COVID-19. And higher the D-dimer, higher the number of clots in the lung, and higher the chances that they will need oxygen. So we use D-dimer to assess the severity of COVID disease. And once D-dimer is raised, a patient has to be started on low molecular weight heparin, which is a blood thinning agent which prevents clotting of the vessels. Serum ferritin. Ferritin is an intracellular iron storage protein, and higher values shows a seriously rising trend, which could even denote a cytokine storm. Cytokine storm is release of all the inflammatory mediators, and it causes a multi-organ failure. COVID virus and especially the black fungus or mucormycosis, which we are talking about, they both survive on very higher iron stores. And the other complications of high iron stores is the possibility of a prothrombotic event in view of blood stasis due to the hypercoagulable state. So ferritin levels have a significant prognostic value, and higher the ferritin, the worse is the prognosis. And LDH is the lactic dehydrogenase, which looks for signs of damage to the body's tissues. LDH has been shown to be a potentially prognostic biomarker in patients with COVID-19, and elevated LDH signifies tissue hypoperfusion, which indicates that there is a blood clot, so there is decreased oxygen supply to the tissues, and so there is tissue damage, which releases the lactic dehydrogenase, which is detected in the blood. So in COVID-19 infected patients, it helps in predicting acute respiratory distress syndrome. So these are the few biomarkers. They are called as biomarkers in diagnosing the severity of COVID infection, which also helps in managing or treating the patient. So when you see this graph, the viruses are in increased number in the initial stages, but once the virus enters the human system, the immunity starts developing, and the host immune response increases as the course increases. And the main immunopathogenesis of COVID-19 infection is due to the immune response. So during the asymptomatic phase, the normal lab test with mild lymphopenia and normal blood gas analysis, whereas in case of mild to moderate disease, increasing lymphopenia, that is, there will be a NLR ratio reversal, and then D-dimer will start increasing. So once the D-dimer starts increasing, they will go on to mild hypoxia. In case of severe disease, the D-dimer and CRP will be increased, so that you have to start low molecular weight heparin for the increase in D-dimer and steroid in case of CRP increase. Whereas in critical, all the inflammatory markers with progressive cytopenias will be detected, for which you have to start mainly for cytokine storm. You have a toxolizumab, which is used for preventing the cytokine storm. So now coming to the importance of markers, complete blood count, namely lymphopenia, eosinopenia, and NLR ratio of greater than 3, greater severity and worst prognosis, thrombocytopenia, which gives a risk of myocardial damage, and all the inflammatory markers, if they are highly elevated, they either give you that the patient is under severe disease, thromboembolic manifestations may occur, myocardial injury, and worst prognosis. And immunological markers like IL-6 can also be detected, which indicates cytokine storm and worst prognosis. So these are the importance of clinical symptoms and the biomarkers or lab investigations based on which treatment can be given. So now moving on to the identification of high-risk patients. There are certain comorbid conditions which are taken as a high-risk patient, like 50 and above, ischemic heart disease, diabetes, hypertension, COPD and asthma, chronic kidney or liver disease, immunosuppression, and even obesity. And clinically, hypoxia less than 94, tachycardia of greater than 100 per minute, respiratory rate of greater than 30 per minute, and hypotension or lowered BP. And lab investigations, lymphopenia with an NLR ratio of greater than 3, CRP greater than 100, serum ferritin greater than 300 micrograms per liter, LDH greater than 450, and D-dimer greater than 1000 nanograms per liter. We have seen cases with even D-dimer of 10,000, and all the patients who had above 10,000 of D-dimer, we have lost the patient as per our experience at Annapurna Medical College and Hospital. Now coming to the treatment aspect, having known the investigations and symptomatology of COVID-19, patients with SpO2 of greater than 94 should not be admitted in COVID-19 hospital as per the Tamil Nadu government guideline. And treatment for category 1 patient, they are advised home isolation. Home isolation, you need a separate room with the toilet facility, and if you do not have such facility at home, they have to be referred to a COVID care center. And the treatment given is vitamin C 500 mg OD for 5 days, zinc 50 mg OD for 5 days, and tablet paracetamol 500 mg 4 times a day or whenever needed. Adequate hydration and prone position is advisable. Prone position is very, very important in managing COVID-19 infection, which I will be telling you in another slide following. And seek hospital care if any red flag sign. And treatment of category 2, they may be admitted in any primary health center or the COVID care center. You have to do a complete blood count, X-ray chest, monitor blood glucose, advise prone position, and if the oxygen saturation has come down below 94, you have to start them on oxygen of 2 to 4 liters per minute and titrate it as per the guidelines. And antiviral, based upon if it is an earlier infection, you can start them on remdesivir, and then azithromycin, vitamin C and zinc, and tablet ranitidine 150 mg BD for 5 days, and tablet methylprednisolone, which is a steroid, 16 mg BD for 7 days have to be started if your D-dimer has been raised. And if your CRP has been raised, and low molecular weight heparin of 0.4 ml subcutaneous has to be started if your D-dimer is raised. And medication for any comorbid condition like diabetes or hypertension or thyroid, they have to be continued along with the treatment of COVID. And strict glycemic control has to be maintained, because we are starting on steroid. If the patient is already a diabetic, his glucose levels will shoot up. So you have to titrate it using an insulin. Hydration, adequate hydration, and if saturation falls in category 2 below 90%, they have to be referred to a COVID hospital. And this is the importance of supine position. Supine position is lying on your belly. It is nothing but lying on your belly. So you have to lie on your belly for 30 minutes, and then next 30 minutes you have to lie on your left side, and then you have to, next 30 minutes you have to lie on your right side. Why this is suggested is, if you lie in a supine position or your back, the heart will be present on the top, and the pressure and the space occupied by the heart reduces the lung capacity. So once the lung capacity is reduced, what happens is the oxygenation reduces. But in case if you lie down supine or belly on the bed, your heart will go down. So you will have an extra space so that the lungs have a larger space for it to expand. So oxygenation will be better. That is why the supine position is very much advised in all cases of COVID, whether they are asymptomatic, symptomatic, critical, or whatever be the stage of clinical disease. Supine position helps in the treatment very well. And coming to treatment category 3, they have to be admitted in the hospital with oxygen supply. Prone position is very much advised. Oxygen therapy based upon the guideline given by various associations and the governments, and tablet antivirals can be started. Azithromycin, vitamin C, zinc, ranitidine, methylprednisolone in case of CRP is raised, low molecular weight heparin in case of D-dimer is raised, and comorbid condition treatment has to be supplemented to the treatment of COVID, strict glycemic control, and adequate hydration. So there is not much of difference in category 2 and category 3. But only thing is, you have to monitor in such a way that the oxygen therapy or the number of liters of oxygen will vary in category 2 and category 3. And there are two different treatment modalities which are in there are two school of thoughts whether to use remdesivir or not to use remdesivir. But remdesivir, which is an inhibitor of the viral RNA-dependent RNA polymerase, so it prevents the multiplication of the virus and it mainly prevents progression of disease from moderate to severe. And for a condition which you have to follow is, they should not have hepatic or renal disinfection because it is a nephrotoxic drug. And as per our experience in Annapurna Medical College and Hospital, we have seen that once remdesivir is started early in the infection, they become negative, RT-PCR negative within a span of 5 to 7 days. And use of tocilizumab, this is an interleukin-6 receptor antagonist which is mainly used during the cytokine storm. When will you assess that the cytokine storm has occurred? When your D-dimer goes beyond 1000 or your serum ferritin, all your biomarkers are extensively increased. Then you have to think of a cytokine storm and you have to use tocilizumab, which is mainly given in severe disease and especially in raised inflammatory markers and not improving even on steroids. You can suggest using of tocilizumab. So these are the treatment modalities which are available in a nutshell, because there are so many factors. Oxygen therapy, you need at least 3 to 4 hours to talk on oxygen therapy. You have BiPAP machine, CPAP machine, and so many nasal prongs. What are the methods of oxygen in which you can give oxygen to the patient? So in a nutshell, I have given you an idea of the treatment modalities available for COVID-19. So though we have repeatedly talking about prevention, from my side, I'm giving you a short note of prevention. Masks are always required. Wash and sanitize your hands often. Avoid touching your face with mask. Stay home if you are sick, and always keep 6 feet apart and don't share items. And one important thing most of us don't know is the cough and sneeze etiquette. How you have to sneeze and cough, especially in this pandemic. If you have a tissue or a handkerchief, better sneeze into that handkerchief or tissue and immediately bin it and kill it. Whereas if you don't have a handkerchief or a tissue and you don't have a time before you sneeze, you have to sneeze in your sleeves, that is your upper arm. So that is the best way to cough or sneeze, which prevents the spread of the droplets, which is the mode of transmission of COVID-19. So coronavirus has not gone away. So keep your friends and family always protected. Stay at least 1 meter apart and always use mask. So don't spread the truth and not the virus. So we are not living in fear, but we are living in faith that we will overcome this pandemic and become a mask-free world. So think positive that we will overcome this pandemic, and with all our positive inputs and energy, let us come out of this COVID-19 infection throughout the globe. Thank you for your patient hearing.
Thank you, Dr. Usha. Can you switch on your video?
Sir.
You have to close down your presentation.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. It was an excellent presentation. The slides were so beautifully done, and it shows any common man can understand from this. So that is the way that you have made the slides. Definitely, it needs a lot of applaud from everyone present here. There are questions from the participants. I'll go one by one.
Yes, sir.
Can I get vaccinated even if I have another viral infection?
Usually any viral infection, you have fever or some symptoms. You can wait for 15 days or 2 weeks and then you can go for the vaccination.
Can I get vaccinated when the hemoglobin levels are low?
There is nothing to do with hemoglobin level, but it is better to improve your hemoglobin level because we don't know what are all the side effects. There are many questions still arising with the side effects of this vaccine. So it is better to improve your hemoglobin level and then go for a vaccination.
Shall we get vaccination after having a dose of TT, tetanus toxoid?
There is no data regarding simultaneous vaccination, but to be on the safer side, the immune system should not get confused. So it is better to have a vaccination after 3 weeks of your tetanus toxoid or any vaccine for that matter.
If there is an emergency of going abroad for a job, but the country does not allow who are not vaccinated, first dose of Covishield has been vaccinated, can we take second dose earlier, like after 30 days?
No. Actually, as per the protocol given, it is better to take as per the protocol given about 12 weeks for Covishield and say 4 to 6 weeks for Covaxin. It is better, only then your immune response will be good. So even most of the abroad countries, they look into the duration of the gap between the first and second dose to look into their immunity status of an individual.
How long will the COVID affected patients shed or disseminate the coronavirus?
As per the data which we have now, they say it will be shed up to around 10 days to 14 days. But we have seen cases which shed the virus even up to 3rd week. So we don't know. We have to do an RT-PCR and then detect the virus, and only if it is negative we can say that the patient is not shedding the virus.
The next one is a very similar kind of a question, but it shows that how long the affected people can spread the virus after recovery.
After recovery, that is what, as I said, once he is RT-PCR negative, he will not be infectious. So you need not worry. So that is why earlier they said that an RT-PCR negative result is a requisite for discharge of a patient from a hospital. But now, because of the testing load which the country cannot manage, they have taken away the option of doing a negative PCR test as one of the discharge mandatory.
Can we shift between the vaccines, taking Covishield as the first dose and Covaxin as the second dose?
No, you have to take only the same vaccine as the first and second dose, because the methodology in which the immune system is stimulated is totally different.
Can you just elaborate on the do's and don'ts after vaccination?
There are no do's and don'ts. Only thing is you may have mild fever, pain, etc., which you can manage at home. And as the many people or the social media tell, you should not take alcohol, you should not take chicken and all those. It is all myths. There are no proved scientific data on don'ts after a vaccination.
In case a person is going to get COVID-19 in spite of taking 2 doses of vaccine, is it essential to get the 3rd vaccination?
No, it is not necessary.
How much is the chance of getting infection for the second time?
Now, as per the data, they say around only 0.4% have been infected following vaccination. That they say, earlier they said it could be due to the variant, and apart from that, the most important point is most of those people who got infected after vaccination, they did not cross the deadline of antibody response. Most of them, before developing the antibody response, they have got infected. If you have got 1 dose of vaccination, you are not fully protected. If you have got second dose of vaccination and following 2 weeks of second dose of vaccination only, you are fully protected.
Which vaccination is best for a diabetic or a BP patient?
There is no criteria which vaccine is best. At this situation, whatever vaccine is available, take it and get the benefit.
8th post-vaccination day, D-dimer will elevate more than 3000 or 5000 nanogram per ml, and CRP normal and no alteration in CBC or RT-PCR is negative. What is your interpretation, madam?
Madam sir, I didn't follow the question.
No. Day 8 post-vaccination,
Okay.
the D-dimer will elevate more than 3000 or 5000 nanogram,
Okay.
and CRP is normal, and there is no alteration in CBC, RT-PCR is negative. What is your
As
interpretation?
far as I know, post-vaccination D-dimer will not rise. It will not rise. Only in case of infection, the D-dimer, only when there is a thromboembolic manifestation, only D-dimer will rise. And vaccination as such will not induce thromboembolism, and it will not raise the D-dimer or CRP.
Any chance for elevation of D-dimer on first week of vaccination, especially after Covishield?
No, sir.
Post-vaccine evaluation of D-dimer, is it essential or not?
No, it is not at all essential.
Shall I take Clivera tablet as a preventive medication for COVID-19?
Yeah, because it has been approved by the ICMR, you can very well take Clivera.
There are so many congratulatory message for your presentation. Like exemplary presentation, excellent presentation, like those things. Shall we get vaccination after that? I already asked you. How long should we continue taking anticoagulants after recovery from COVID-19?
Anticoagulants, actually they say they have to take anticoagulants up to a duration of about 4 to 8 weeks following COVID infection.
Okay. The next thing is style of presentation is wonderful, madam.
Thank you, sir.
I am vaccinated with Covaxin and it took booster after 2 months. I took booster after 2 months. What's your advice for me?
Nothing. Be free, but maintain social distancing and wear mask.
How long I need to be in blood thinner if I was down with COVID-19?
How long should I be with?
Blood thinner.
Blood thinner. That's what I told you, sir. Maximum for about 4 to 6 weeks.
Why the efficacy of attenuated viral vaccine is less than a viral vector vaccine?
Efficacy of?
Attenuated viral vaccine is less than a viral vector vaccine.
No, actually it is not so. Live attenuated will produce better immune response because it produces subclinical infection.
Ma'am, if iron level is high, can I get the COVID-19? Iron content. Iron content is going to be high. Whether do I get the COVID-19 or not?
No. There is no relation between iron content of your body and COVID infection.
These are all students asking.
Okay, no problem. You can ask their doubts, sir.
Whether I can change my vaccine during annual vaccination. Like for example, I have taken 2 doses of Covishield. If there is going to be a recommendation for an annual vaccination, next year can I take Covaxin?
That no one knows now, sir. We have to have a study and then as per the government guidelines only we have to follow.
Can you enlighten about the black fungus? Because we have a speaker coming to this, but again they've asked, maybe you can enlighten.
So this black fungus, as you know, is mucormycosis. It actually infects people who are immunocompromised, and mainly because those people who are on treatment, especially on oxygen therapy, their sugar level rise because of the steroid which we are giving as a treatment part. So this immunosuppression enhances them to get infected, and mainly because of this oxygen therapy, because once oxygen therapy is given, there is a suction apparatus through which the oxygen is hydrated and given. So if we don't commonly or regularly change the water content of the suction, it has spores in it which may induce an infection. So usually it is a rhinocerebral, which very commonly and very dangerous disease also, because it immediately enters into the brain and causes death.
What about the oral vaccine against COVID-19?
Still under study, but no one knows its efficacy because the studies are not yet published. Even the phase 1 trials have not yet been published.
Can we take remdesivir to a mother with a newborn baby affected by COVID?
See, remdesivir when to give is a very tricky question. Only in the early disease, once the patient is infected and if the physician suspects that he is in the early stage of disease, it is better to start remdesivir. Otherwise, it is not necessary.
If I have allergy to high dose tablets, can I get vaccinated?
Allergic to?
Some tablets. I think the question was not correct. If I am allergic to some tablets, can I get vaccinated?
Yeah. You can get.
Can why the physician recommends to get vaccination after a few months? Those who recently got affected and cured of COVID.
That is because this COVID infection itself would have produced an immunity, and still now we don't know how long this immunity lasts. So to have a better protection, we give them 3 months time and then have a second dose or first dose of COVID vaccine, because we don't know the time of protection the COVID infection gives as well as the COVID vaccination gives.
There is one question. Can we get vaccination during menstruation cycle? Should we consider the period cycle between 2 doses of vaccine?
You can, the menstruation cycle has no relation to vaccination. You can very well take.
I'm only picking up the most relevant questions.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Rather than medicine, can you suggest what other things that we can take to get control of COVID?
That where everyone knows: mask, social distancing, and hand washing.
Is it good for getting vaccination with second dose after delivery?
After delivery, second dose. Yeah.
Okay. Should I test my CRP prior to vaccination?
No, no, no.
Why the non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs are suggested instead of steroid drugs?
Why non-steroidal?
Anti-inflammatory drugs are not suggested instead of steroid drugs.
Because if you give steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs, if at all you have any inflammation, it will suppress the inflammation and you will not know whether you are progressing with the disease or not. So to prevent that, we are giving non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drugs.
What's your advice to avoid mucor fungus who is undergoing oxygen therapy?
There is no advice as such. It is only a luck by chance.
Okay. And there is a request from a faculty or a student. Madam, please conduct a study on evaluation of D-dimer on post-vaccinated.
Okay, sure. We will do a study.
Thank you so much, Abhi. You are so kind enough to spare your valuable time and you are being so patient enough to answer to all the questions. It was really a wonderful presentation, and I think this is really creating a kind of good awareness among all our students and faculty. As I told you earlier, it was one of the best presentations that we have heard of COVID-19 lecture series. And, we do have some more speakers also coming and talking about how to keep themselves stress-free during the COVID time. And then we also have an eye specialist coming and talking on the black fungus. These are things that we are doing, and thank you so much, Dr. Usha.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity given.
Yeah, I will definitely talk to Rajendra and inform him.
Okay, sir. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.